Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and we're here for my LCS week number 3 overview and analysis video in the spring split. Big one here today. Of course, we're in the middle of the split right now. Every 3 weeks we get a super week in this 6-week season of 8 teams, and so here we are at our first super week, the midway point of the spring split, and we've got a lot to cover in this week's video. It was certainly a shocking week across the board, basically for every single team in the LCS this week in one way or another, both good and bad. I would love to know you guys' thoughts on everything down in the comment section below. Did anybody impress you or not impress you? I'm sure you're going to have thoughts because, man, this week was crazy. But quickly, if you want to check out my videos on everything that has been LCS up until this point, week 1, week 2, the primer video that I did at the beginning of the season, you can check out the playlist up in the iCard right now. But without further ado, let's jump right into things. We've got a lot to cover in today's video. So if you are new here, what we're going to do in today's video is go game by game, talking about the advantages and the disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I'll be giving a player of the game and a dud of the game for each individual game that we cover today. Of course, at the end of the week, I will be giving everybody a player of the week and a dud of the week to kind of tie everything into a nice, neat little bow. And then, of course, I'll be updating my power rankings as well. This is a crazy week. There is bound to be some change in terms of the LCS just because there's no way after this week. I know I'm hyping it up a lot, but man, stick around. You won't even really have to wait long for me to talk about some of the crazy stuff that happened over the course of week number 3, but we're really getting into it. We're going to be more than halfway through the split after we're done with today's video. So let's get right into it, starting, of course, with day number 1, our Friday day, the extra day this week, and we kicked it off with a matchup between my number 1 and number 8 teams in my power rankings, top versus bottom. Easy result, right? Immortals taking on Cloud9. Of course, Immortals wins this. We don't have to wait long for the weird shit to start happening in today's video. Immortals is going to pick up this big win here. They're able to take down the 3-1 Cloud9 to pick up their second win of the year. Crazy stuff. I mean, Immortals looked better last week for sure than they did in week number 1, but it's not like they looked great, and there's still a lot of question marks about this team and about who they want to play through, but Cloud9 looked pretty inept in this game. I'm going to be entirely honest. This more so felt like Cloud9 playing bad than it did like Immortals playing good. Although they did have good moments in this game, it certainly wasn't consistent at all, so we'll go ahead and talk about it, but this was just a weird game. Player of the game for me is going to go to Ole in the support position. If there is a proactive member of this team that created a lot of action for Immortals, especially in the back half of the game, it was Ole in the support position on this Bard. You know, I like Ole. I think he's been about as good as I expected. There have been bad moments. Week number 1 was really rough for him. It took some time for him to find his footing back into the league, but him and Tactical seem to have developed a pretty nice synergy here, and it looked a lot better in this game. I think bot lane was definitely the strength for Immortals, and I think Ole showed that off. Tactical certainly had some problems in terms of the damage output he was able to do in team fights in this game, but he was also fine for the most part. I just think Ole was definitely the one you're looking at and saying, hey, you had a really good game. Nice to see him genuinely show up against a really top-tier team like Cloud9. And then the other player I want to shout out is Armeo here. Great stuff, obviously. The big steal at the end of the game on the Ivern was massive, but his pathing, I think, all game was very good, even though it might look curious to, I don't know, maybe like an average viewer. The Ivern consistently going mid over and over and over again to help the Orianna. Now, it didn't really generate this gigantic lead for Ori. You could say that Armeo was wasting time by consistently going mid lane, but what he essentially allowed for Mask across this game was for this really volatile lane of Ori Tristana, where Trist wants to start snowballing out of control. He essentially just kept going mid and didn't allow the Tristana to start playing aggro. He didn't allow JoJo to really exert a lot of the pressure that he's used to exerting in the mid lane, and it really cost them in the late game. They did not have any damage in the back half of this game. Cloud9 didn't in terms of the fights, and a lot of that was because even though Armeo wasn't picking up gold, he really stopped Cloud9 from trying to snowball this, you know, more early game focused comp, I guess, that they have here. Generally, I thought the pathing was really smart. Obviously, the play in the back half of the game was also really good. I thought Armeo and Ole were definitely the standouts, but again, Tactical was able to do some damage, just honestly wasn't super impressed by his game. I thought you could have done more on the Ezreal, but, you know, it is what it is. And then Mask, I thought, was actually really good with the resources that he was given. Had to be protected in the early game, but JoJo's Trist is that good. You're going to need protection basically in any matchup, and Mask, I thought, did a really good job in the back half of the game of team fighting. Same thing with Castle on the top side. Cloud9 was very anti-proactive, very stagnant in this game in terms of their decisions, and we'll get to that in a second, but Immortals did a really good job of pulling the trigger when they needed to, not forcing things that didn't need to be forced, and just capitalizing on the things that they could capitalize on. This was a pretty standard game from Immortals, but one that I wouldn't expect them to be able to repeat against teams that are going to be more proactive against them. But for Cloud9 on the other side, that's becoming a major issue, as they've kind of been able to skill diff a lot of the teams that they ran into at the beginning of the season, because they are just better than everybody, but they are not proactive. Like, this is something we'll talk about as we go further along into the week, but Cloud9 really doesn't make a lot of decisions. They don't really push forward. They're not really willing to risk games. Their games are often a lot slower than a lot of the teams around them. Just very weird stuff, and I think they really did not benefit from that in this particular instance. Dud of the game is going to go to JoJo in the mid lane. Yes, he kind of got camped by Armeo, wasn't allowed to get a big lead, but he needed to be a lot more active in the mid game. He needed to force these fights. You're Rel Tristana. You do not want to be going into the late game without really any sort of snowball lead. It's just not really what this comp is meant to do, and I don't think Cloud9 played it particularly effectively. I think Blabber could have done a lot more, although I feel bad for him. You're playing Rel into Orianna, Bard, Ezreal, Ivern. Like, I don't really know how you're supposed to ever get in and engage. You're literally the only person who can do it on this side, and so it makes your job really important, but also very difficult, so I'm not going to blame him too much. I will say I thought Berserker was definitely the better AD carry in this game. Surprise, surprise. Nobody's really shocked by that, but it was good to see Berserker actually start to step up when the rest of his team wasn't working. Throughout the season up until this point, he's kind of taken a big backseat role. JoJo and Blabber have definitely been kind of the focal point for where Cloud9 wants to run a lot of their offense, if you will, and Berserker's kind of just been the weak side who wins 2v2 and doesn't really, affect the game all that much, but it's nice to see that when things are going wrong, Berserker could still step up. I would just like him to be able to step up more and be good enough to 1v9 and win this game, because Varus was actually in a position to be able to do that. He just didn't. The Bard was better than him this game, and that's just clear. So, bad loss for Cloud9. I mean, you're frustrated by this if you're Cloud9. Obviously, you lost at the end of last week against Shopify. Not really a loss that you felt good about. This is another loss to a team that is very low in the standings. Oftentimes, as we talk about this, you don't want to freak out when a good team loses to a bad team, because oftentimes they just don't take them very seriously, and especially with the players on this C9 team, I could definitely see that being a possibility. We've seen it with G2. We already saw it with Cloud9 last week. Basically, Damwon's done it for years. We see this all the time in every major region. I don't want to freak out about this, but playstyle-wise, there are some things to be concerned about, and Immortals did a good job identifying what those were and capitalizing on them. Armeo and Ole in particular, I thought had really good games, and I guess you just got to kind of hope that this is kind of the spark that Immortals needs. You really were hoping that Castle and Mask were going to be the two to break out if this team did better, but for now, it's really the bot lane and Armeo, and, I guess you can live with that if you're Immortals. And then moving on to our second game here of day number 1, and this was an intriguing one. Two top 4 teams, in my opinion. Team Liquid taking on Energy, and Energy is going to be able to pick up their 4th win of the season. They moved to 4-1, and this team genuinely does look good. I know we talked about how Cloud9 was the super team, but Energy was kind of a quick follow-up for me at number 2. I felt pretty confident about putting them above teams like FlyQuest and Team Liquid in my preseason power rankings, and so far all they have done is reiterate that opinion. They looked great in this game. Some fantastic late-game moments coming in from Contracts and Palafox in particular. The jungle mid duo has been very good to start this split. FBI and Huhi were amazing last week in week number 2. Dokla, while he can be a little bit inconsistent, is for the most part a very, very good top laner. This is a very stacked team, top to bottom. Really, there aren't a lot of weaknesses, and for Team Liquid on the other side, something is not clicking here. I talked about this last week. Hell, I even talked about this in week number 1. There's just something that isn't working for this roster, and I don't really know what it is right now. There isn't a lot of cohesion. The individual talent of a lot of these players has gone down pretty dramatically in the offseason, and so right now, honestly, it just does not look very good for TL. This is a below 500 team, and they absolutely look like it. So let's go ahead and talk about it. For Energy, player of the game is going to go to Palafox on this Orianna. He was amazing in the back half of this game. Obviously, the damage that you can output on that champion is pretty high and pretty consequential, but it was his positioning that really kind of stood out. Not even just the big teleport flank. That's what people are going to remember. And obviously, the TP flank was amazing, but he did a lot outside of that. He was consequential and important in every single team fight. Those shockwaves were massive throughout the entirety of this game, and if he's not making them, they don't have as easy of a time of winning. They maybe still win because Contracts was super strong on the Graves in this one, but it becomes a lot more difficult without the Orianna shockwaves. So credit to Palafox, great start to the year for him as a player. And then Contracts. I mean, these two have great synergy. Both of them are very aggressive, almost feast or famine players. Both of them have kind of been known as players that like to play on the more aggro side, and I think that's why they complement each other so well. It's why somebody like FBI fits so well on this team playing something like Senna, which, by the way, we'll talk about that in a second. You got to start banning Senna against Energy. I know it didn't pop off this game, but it offers so much consistency, and this team loves playing it. FBI is such a good Senna player, genuinely one of the best in the world, but Contracts and Palafox are just opened up on this map to go and be super aggro and to win fights on their own, basically like 2v5, obviously with assistance, but being the focal point and the carries and the damage pieces on the team, if you will. Contracts was amazing on the Graves. That champion is ridiculously strong if you can get him snowballing, and these two were really the ones that pushed them over the top. Like I said, huge ups to FBI. This guy is so good at Senna. It really is something that you have to consider banning alongside the Ivern against Energy. It feels almost too free. This bot lane plays Senna Tahm Kench more than anybody. They did last year when they had Ignar in support as well. It's just a bot lane that FBI is so comfortable in, and obviously he's just going to win it. He's so good in team fights on this champion, and it's really, really fun to watch. It is crazy. I think if you give them all the things they want here, obviously they're going to run you over. It just opens up more options for Energy to play more aggressive in the jungle mid, and really it was the macro and the team fighting. This is a very good Energy team, not just an averagely good Energy team. I'm very excited to see where they go from here. And then for Team Liquid on the other side, not a very good game from them, if we're being honest. Anti-synergy, like, I don't really know what to say at this point. There are some major problems on Team Liquid, and I don't know if it's communication or what it is, but, you know, and Core JJ do not seem to have a lot of synergy in jungle and support, which I think is a big problem. Core is going to get my dud of the game here, and, going from Ole's Bard game to Core's Bard game was certainly jarring, because this was a completely different Bard experience, constantly ulting his jungler as he tries to engage on the Vi, which interrupts his ultimate. Just bad stuff, bad ultimates, bad positioning. This was not a good Core JJ game. Now, he's had a couple of these in the past couple of years. People overrate them, I think, a bit. Typically you're allowed to have one or two bad games a split for me, and I'm not going to freak out too much about it, but I need to see him bounce back from this. He has been able to bounce back in previous splits. He's usually ended stronger than he has started, but he really has not started this split all that good. People were criticizing Yon for quite a bit. I thought he was fine this game. APA got completely run over by Palafox. He just did not have any pressure on the Azir. got trolled by Core JJ multiple times, but even so, you could tell he was tilted by the end of the game because he was going for awful engages with Vile. You can't be getting away with that. Impact and Yon were definitely the two players trying to win this game for Team Liquid, but they just couldn't. This team does not look very good. I know people want them to be a contender, but right now it feels like a top 3 and then everybody else in the league. I think TL is a lot closer to teams like 100 Thieves and Dignitas than they are to Energy and FlyQuest, and I think that that's concerning. That's really not the position that Team Liquid wanted to be in, but it just doesn't feel like they are very complete as a unit right now. Maybe things get better for them as time goes on, but APA is having a rough sophomore year. has not adapted to NA at all. His engages have been very poor, and his early games have been awful, which was something that he was always really good at over in the LCK, and Core really hasn't started great. Really, there's nobody on this team that I feel super confident in right now, and it's hurting Team Liquid in the long run. I really need to see something different over the back half of this week, but for Energy, again, very nice win, super consistent team, very fun to watch. They are great from top to bottom. If Contracts and Palafox are super aggro and allowed to just kind of dominate games in the back half with team fights, then they're not going to lose a lot of games. I mean, even Cloud9, like, they're going to struggle to go up. Like, Cloud9's going to struggle to go up against Contracts and Palafox if they're ripping like this. That's what happened in the finals last year, and so credit to them. FBI and Huhi need to be stopped on the Senna Tahm Kench. It's too free for them. Generally, I just like the ideas that Energy are going for, and I think it's really helped them a lot at the beginning of the season. And then moving on to game number 3 here, and a battle of 1 and 3 teams that have not necessarily had the best start to the year. Dignitas taking on Shopify Rebellion. And it's Dignitas who's going to claim that second victory here with a nice win, a pretty dominating win, and both of these teams kind of doing what they have done across this split, and generally like what these players have done across this split up until this point. Dig has a pretty standard comp, one that puts Dove on something that wants to be a lot more utility focused and really wants XU to create a lot for them in terms of being proactive on an engaged champion like Sejuani. And then Shopify wants to go with their super low range, very tanky comps that they're very accustomed to at this point. Insanity is insane. And, this isn't new to anybody who has watched Insanity, not only recently, but also last year on TSM or in Academy on Dignitas or on Immortals many years ago. He's always been one that's, picked things like Garen mid or Sion mid. He was a big Renekton mid player back in the day. Graves a lot last year. He's certainly been willing to pull out, the bruisers in the mid lane, but into Renata, I was gonna say into comps like what Dig has. Into Renata, I just don't really know about that, man. It certainly became a bit of an issue, so we'll talk about it. Isles is player of the game. The Renata was mega important in this game. Every single ultimate that came out from that Renata ended up winning the game. Like, truly it was a problem. Shopify had no answer to it. Credit to Isles, he was in the right spot and did a lot of the right things, and I really like Isles as a player. Honestly, he was one of the players that I know I'm not supposed to have bias on this channel, and I don't when I talk about this. You probably couldn't even recognize it when I talked about Isles, but man, do I want Isles to succeed. He is one of the players that I really want to see break out and become a really good support at this level. I've always liked his game, and I was really happy to see him have such a good game, but how much can I even really attribute to him as a player when the champion was just such an insta-counter? I mean, you hit the ultimate on Garen, Cassante, and Kalista, and they're all dead. Like, there is nothing left to do. Varus Arrow comes in, and it's doomed. Like, you layer the CC with Sejuani and with Gnar, and it's literally over. Like, there is no way to counter that. So yeah, credit to Isles for being able to pull the trigger, but a lot of it was Renata just being incredibly strong in this matchup. Of course, Tomo, I think, also had a good game. He's had a much stronger start to the split than I was expecting. I honestly have been pretty into Tomo so far this year. I'm not out on Tomo. I don't think he's like a bad player or anything. I've never really been like surprised when he plays well, but he has stepped into this role and actually been very positive, I would say, for Dignitas. Better than a lot of other AD carries on teams that I think maybe expected more. It's good to see him performing well. Glad to see XU bounce back. Rough week last week. Dove had a rough week last week. He was better in this game on something a little bit more comfortable in the Talia, and Rich looked a lot better. He has been pretty inconsistent at the start of this split, but if you can get him into situations where he can play Gnar and just team fight, he's going to be in the right spot. So overall, good game for Dignitas. Certainly not frustrated, but I am frustrated with Shopify because you've got to protect yourself against things like this happening. I'm fine if you want to go something like Garen mid. There are ways to make this work, and obviously Insanity loves picks like this, but if you're going to leave something like Renata up, you're just doomed. Like, I get you got to ban Azir, Orianna, and Ashe. Like, that has to happen, but pick Renata. Like, you have to take that thing away. It is too big of a problem in this instance. Insanity's going to get my dud of the game here because the Garen was useless. Like, truly, they lacked so much damage in the back half of this game because Garen had no reliable way to actually get through the Gnar and the Sejuani and the Renata ultimate to get on to anybody that ever actually mattered. He was never relevant in a team fight, and they really needed damage. It was Kalista trying her best to deal some damage. There was that miracle fight where B-Boy got a quadra kill, which is great. B-Boy's been good as well, but outside of that, nobody on this team played well. Zeyzal looked useless on the Senna. Boogie couldn't do anything on the Maokai, not entirely his fault, and Fake God has just been overmatched. He's losing in lane to everybody at this level, which is so frustrating because I liked Fake God so much in the NACL. It just has been a really, really bad start to the year for him. This is not looking good for Shopify. This might be the worst team in the LCS, and that's really a bad thing to say. I don't really know what else to tell you. This team has a very set playstyle, and it doesn't feel like they really even know how to execute on that playstyle all that well. They're not flexible. They're not playing well at the moment. This is not a good League of Legends team. Shopify is really in a bad state. And then for Dig, this is a nice win. It is against Shopify, who looks really bad right now, but at least they were able to capitalize. But again, I'm not going to freak out. I want to see what they can do the rest of this week. If they continue to have good performances, like if Tomo can continue to step up, if we see better performances out of Rich and XU on the top side, then yeah, I feel pretty good about this being like a middle tier team. But this win doesn't really change my opinion at all. This was more a bad game by Shopify than a good game by Dignitas. And I just hope that they can continue this momentum after this win, I guess. And then moving on to our fourth game of day one, the final game of the first third of the week, we had FlyQuest taking on 100 Thieves. And FlyQuest is going to be able to pick up the win here. They're going to move to 4-1. They're going to tie themselves in first place with energy after 5 games. Pretty good stuff from Fly. For a team full of boomers, they're actually doing relatively well. This bot lane has stepped up. The veterans, I think, are the most impressive part to me. I felt pretty confident Masu and Busio was going to be like a top 3-ish bot lane in the LCS. I talked about that in my primer. I felt pretty good about that, but Jensen and Whippo have been really good for this team, and I just didn't know if that was going to be the case going into this year, but it absolutely has been a major positive for 100 Thieves. Are just a little bit too inexperienced. Their macro was just bad. They got everything gapped this game, if we're being entirely honest. This wasn't a particularly close one, but you're a young team in a rebuild. Losing to one of the best teams in the league like this, it's not going to freak you out too much, so long as you feel confident that you can learn from it and bounce back from it. But let's go ahead and talk about it. Player of the game for me is going to go to Bwipo in the top lane. I think a lot of people are going to want to see Masu get this. I think Busio was great here. Jensen was really good this game. Inspired went deathless on Maokai, but I'm going to give it to Bwipo. I thought Bwipo was majorly impactful in this game on the Olaf, and honestly, if there's one player in the league that I've been the most surprised about just like really being amazing at the start of this split, it's been Bwipo. He has arguably been the best top laner in the LCS, and while that isn't the weirdest thing in the entire world, it's just super cool to see him come back into the league and be like this good immediately. He's not just doing well shot calling and macro wise like everybody was saying, like, oh, he's just a shot caller. Oh, he's just a macro guy. You know, he's not going to win isolated 1v1. His mechanics are awesome, and he is actually gapping everybody. He gapped Sniper in this game. Sniper was still okay. He was definitely probably the best player on 100 Thieves in this game, but Bwipo was better. That Olaf was a menace, and there really was no way to stop it. Again, just very cool to see Bwipo show up and look so good in a matchup against, you know, the next up-and-coming NA superstar top laner. It's really cool to see kind of this legacy matchup, and for Bwipo to show that he absolutely still has it. But like I said, Masu and Busio were great this game. Masu going up against his opposing AD carry rookie here in Meech. This is definitely pro Masu. The Varus was major in this game. The Nico support looked great. Busio was really good on this pick, obviously a former mid lane player. He knows how to play Nico, but Masu and Busio looked scary in this game. Neither of these AD carries really had kind of the keys to the kingdom in the first couple of weeks. Both of them were pretty heavily on weak side duty, specifically Meech. Masu was there too, but it was really nice to see both of them get a lot of priority, but Masu was definitely the one to come out on top in this one. Credit to Busio in that same vein. Jensen's Azir mechanics are phenomenal. Like, this guy has not lost a step in terms of playing Azir. You can argue that maybe he's not as consistent at being able to carry games in the late game, but his ability to facilitate an Olaf or facilitate a Varus is still top notch, and he never really puts himself in dangerous positions. Great stuff. Like I said, Inspired went deathless on Maokai. Just generally a very good game from FlyQuest. A bit of an everything gap, and I'm really proud to be able to say that. And then for 100 Thieves on the other side, bit of an everything gap. You're definitely not happy to hear that, but it could be worse for this team. Dead of the game is pretty up in the air because I don't think anybody played particularly well, but I'm going to give it to Ayla. Some of the engages in the back half of this game, man. Like, I understand Ayla's a more aggressive player. He's always been somebody that's more proactive, wants to try and go out there and make plays, and that's something that I praise on him. That's actually the reason I ranked him higher than Busio going into the year in terms of, like, current ability talent, right? I thought he was more willing to go out there on more unconventional picks and actually be able to make them work. He's a little bit more versatile, flexible, but man, when he misses way harder. Like, that is very clear. This was not a good game on the Renata. He was trying to find flank angles on this champion and just getting blown up instantly in fights. This was a 4v5 for a lot of this game. Honestly, it was really like a 1v5 for a lot of this game. Shout out Sniper, because Quid was useless, no damage on the Silas. There was this weird bug, I'm not sure if anybody saw, where I think it showed him having Maokai ult, and he actually had Nico ultimate, and it really like was a problem in the game. Like, it clearly showed that the FlyQuest team was not expecting it, and that actually caused some issues, but I don't know, they didn't pause or reset or anything for it, so shout out. But Quid wasn't very useful. He has these games where he's just awful. He's had a lot of them over the past year. Meech certainly was not as good as Masu in this game. River, really for the first time this year, got like really outplayed, where it was clear that he just was not the better jungler in this game, but that's Inspired. You're not really worried about that. Like I said, there were good moments from Sniper. His team fighting was okay here, and he was in relatively good positions, but an Aatrox can't win this game on his own. 100 Thieves had a lot of problems this game, but I think you just have to hope that it's a learning experience. Again, this was never supposed to be the year where everything clicked for this team. I don't think. They're already better than I think a lot of people expected them to be, with picking up wins over like Team Liquid and being better than the bottom teams in the league by a pretty clear margin. Losing to FlyQuest isn't something that's going to bother you too much. FlyQuest is genuinely one of the best teams in the LCS, if not the best team in the LCS right now. It's them, Energy, and then however much you believe in Cloud9 on whatever streak they're on right now. Those are the three best teams. FlyQuest absolutely deserves to be a part of that. Bwipo is playing out of his mind. He is the star on this team. Inspired is arguably the most consistent jungler in the league at the moment. Who's surprised by that? And Masu and Busio have adapted really well. Jensen's playing at a super high level, even mechanically. There are so many positives for this team that you just have to hope they're going to be able to keep them up, because right now, they're an absolute blast to watch. But that's going to bring us to day number 2, our middle day here in week number 3, and we kicked it off with a battle of 2 and 3 teams. Team Liquid taking on Dignitas. And Liquid is luckily going to be able to pick up the win here, but man, this game was not good by either team. Both of these teams played so poor in this game that it's honestly difficult to form like a coherent thought about this game in general, because I don't think anybody played well at all under basically any circumstance. There was one player in this game where I was like, you're doing a pretty cool thing. Maybe two, which we will get into in a second, but Holy Lord, this was a bad game of League of Legends. I have really been pushing for North America as like a league that should be taken relatively seriously, or more seriously than it has been. I don't think it's this distant fourth. I think it's a lot closer to the LEC than people give it credit for in terms of depth of talent and just what the teams are. I think we saw that last year with Energy being able to beat G2 and get out of groups, but these games do not help. Like, games like this do not help the perception of this region at all. Not to say the LEC hasn't had their own fair share of shenanigans this year, but let's talk about it. Player of the game is going to go to Impact, but as you can see, Dud of the game is also going to stay on Team Liquid. This is going to be one of those rare instances where I do give Dud of the game to somebody on the winning team. It's going to go to Yawn. This was a very bad game from TL just in general. They're very lucky that Impact was able to bail them out. He was really the only one even trying to win the game in the back half of this on either team, and the Udyr was basically unkillable. So the fact that he was running in and doing a lot, awesome. Really happy for him. I'm glad Impact is on this team. I'm still lower on him because I think his game-to-game variance is higher than people say it is, but you know, he's a veteran and he knows what he's supposed to do in the back half of the game. He's not going to throw things away for no reason. His weakness is laning phase. And so you get to this late game where Udyr is unkillable. Great. Like, he's good in that situation. I think there's some merit to be dished out to Core JJ. I think there's some merit to be dished out to APA for some of their performances. I think their individual mechanics were okay here. But for the most part, Team Liquid was super passive, super boring, and kind of just lucked into a win by Dignitas not wanting to win. You know, credit to Impact, but Yawn is absolutely dud of the series here, or dud of the game. Like, it is not close. This was a really bad Lucian game. He was doing no damage. He was stepping up and really not accomplishing anything. This did not feel like a champion he was super practiced or experienced on. I like Yawn more than most. I think Lucian's one of those champions that could potentially be of Yawn's playstyle because he likes to be more of an aggressor early than like a focal point in 5v5s late. He's really somebody that doesn't want to be the primary damage carry on a team by the time you get to Baron fights or anything like that. It's just not a responsibility that he's been able to live up to as a pro, but man, he looked awful in this game, and I know people criticize him, but like, this was bad. This is worse than I've seen Yawn in quite a long time. Also had some very head-scratching plays again. He has been like bad this split. He hasn't just been below average. He has been not good for Team Liquid, like actively detrimental. Congrats to them. They're at 500 because of this win, but surely this is not going to raise my confidence or expectation in this team when they played like this. And then for Dig on the other side, how do they lose this? Like, how do you lose this game? You've got an Orianna in a relatively decent position. You've got so many go buttons with Renata ultimate, with Nocturnal, with potential Aatrox flanks. Even a rogue Shockwave can start a fight here. There are so many ways to make plays, and you chose none of them. This game went 31 minutes. For 15 of those 31 minutes, Dignitas didn't make a single play. They didn't decide to do anything. They sat around and waited to lose. I don't know what happened here. I don't know if their comms just turned off, if like all of a sudden they couldn't talk to each other and all of them just decided to not play the game and not make a mistake, but they literally were in a commanding position. I can't express this enough to anybody who didn't watch the game. They were in a commanding position, and then they just stopped making plays, and eventually Team Liquid took their Nexus. It's like they were AI bots. Like, I genuinely can't explain what happened to Dignitas. I want to give everybody on that team dud of the game, but I don't think individually any of them made any major errors. Tomo probably stepped up one too many times, but it's Kalista. Like, that's going to happen. There were some good shockwaves from Dove. He had a very good early game. Isles had some very good moments on the Renata, but again, this was a team misstep. My concern with North America has not been that they've been too inactive. In fact, the reputation and idea of the league is that they are a slow league, and that's what we've been talking about with NA. That really hasn't been the case over the first 2 weeks, but it certainly was in week 3, and it certainly was in this game. This felt like the most boring 2015 LCK game that you can remember, except both teams are playing bad instead of both teams are playing safe. I just don't, this is not good. It's bad for Dig, it's bad for TL. This was not a good game for either team, but I guess at least TL got the win in the end, huh? And then moving on to our second game of day 2 here, and top of the table clash. Like, I don't know, what a weird game this was as well. It was FlyQuest taking on Cloud9, the teams that people were really excited to see play against each other right now. And FlyQuest picks up a big, big win here. Cloud9 continues whatever disastrous streak they're on. They've lost 3 in a row after dominating their first 3 games against good teams like Energy at the beginning of that stretch as well. But FlyQuest, what a massive win to move to 5-1. A really dominant start to the year for them. All 5 members of this team are looking really good at the current moment. They feel very complete as a roster, very similar to what I've said about Energy. And Cloud9's got some issues. There are a couple players on this team that have had a really rough rough couple of games here. I do think there are players that are receiving more hate than maybe they deserve just because they generally aren't liked by the community as much, and we'll talk about that when we get there, but there are some players that are liked by the community that are not playing well right now, and I'm gonna have to point it out, but let's talk about FlyQuest first and foremost. Player of the game, Busio. I've been critical of him in the past because it really felt like if he didn't get Rakan last year, he really struggled as a player. Maybe that was a double lift thing. Maybe it was just 100 Thieves kind of team cohesion thing. I don't know. He just looked a lot worse on other champions, but he has been amazing to start this split. Masu, I think, has definitely taken some time to really pop off. He's not really been given, like I said earlier, the keys to the kingdom, if you will. He's not really entrusted to be the primary carry of this team in a lot of different scenarios. There are a lot of backup plans to backup plans in these drafts. They don't really give him a lot of attention in terms of jungle pressure, but Busio has been awesome to start this split, and this was another really good game from him. Honestly, this is maybe the best LCS game he's ever had. Like, this was a breakthrough performance. Those Nautilus hooks, I mean, he was curving them. I know that's not how the skill works, but he was curving those hooks. He was dodging minions, dodging frontliners, and just hitting priority targets over and over again. This was a massive game for Busio and for kind of the perception of him as a player. I have been a bit lower. I have been a bit more reserved in terms of how I talk about him, but this could be a big breakout situation with how good FlyQuest is and how aggressive and confident he's able to play in the current moment. He doesn't have to be the big playmaker for this team because you've got, Bwipo and Inspired on the top side that are going to be able to do that. But if he is, then it's just a massive boon towards what FlyQuest is doing. And he is a big reason why this team is in first place, why they are 5-1. Want to give a big shout out to Masu as well. Again, I know I've kind of just sat there and been like, he's not really a big part of what this team wants to do yet, and I agree with that, but the guy just went up against Berserker and won. Like, not just, won the game, like, he dominated this laning phase. This is really good stuff from Masu. Very good week 3 from this bot lane here on FlyQuest. Inspired continues to just win. He has so much pressure everywhere he goes. I'm honestly kind of close to the point of saying he's the best jungler in North America. Like, I love Blabber, and, it's hard for me to dethrone Blabber from anything because he is the best jungler North America has ever seen. But, dude, Inspired just doesn't have bad games. He is an A+ caliber player right now in the LCS. Jensen's been very good. Bwipo has been amazing on the top side. He really just outclassed Fudge in this game, which we will get to, but FlyQuest just feels like such a complete unit. Busio was the star of this game, but next game it could be Bwipo again. Next game it could be Inspired. We could see some amazing Jensen ults. Masu is yet to have that breakthrough performance, but I've been talking him up for, a year and a half now, or I guess basically half a year is more accurate, about how he was ready to dominate the LCS. This team is loaded at the current moment, and they are following through. They are proving it. They're backing it up. They're 5-1 with a win over Cloud9 here, and that is massive. But for C9, disaster has struck. This is not good for them. They do not look good. They are not playing good. I genuinely can't tell you what the exact problem on this team is, but a lot of the decision-making is just, the micro decision-making is so poor, and that leads me into my dud of the game, which absolutely is going to go to Berserker. I don't think I've ever given him a dud of the game on the channel. If I have, I don't know. Sorry that I'm wrong about this. I'm sure no one off the top of their head knows or could fact-check me, but it certainly hasn't happened more than a couple of times. He is a super consistent player, and he is typically just better than everybody that he's playing against, but he has kind of been lackluster to start this year. I mean, people were talking about him as clear-cut the best player on Cloud9 and the best player in North America, me included, going into this year, and even in their wins in the first 3 weeks, he was weak side, and he was fine in the isolated 2v2, but it really was about JoJo, who was really dominating, and JoJo was still great in this game. He tried his best to 1v9. JoJo is actually still playing really well outside of the game that we saw earlier this week, but that wasn't his fault. Again, go watch the Immortals section. But Berserker's been bad, and him and Vulcan don't really seem to have great chemistry. It's something I'm going to continue to monitor, but this is already turning out to be the worst split he's ever played in the LCS. I see a lot of people blaming Fudge as well. There was a really bad teleport on the Aatrox later in this game, and honestly, he did not play well. Bwipo's been destroying everybody, though, so I'm going to cut him a bit of slack. And also, generally, I talk about this in some of the other regions with players like Zeka. There are more. Tion's another one. Even someone like a Karsa, if you go back far enough. Tarzan. A lot of LPL junglers, if you haven't noticed, where Reddit decided a year ago or 2 years ago that they were going to dislike that player. And Fudge is one of those, I think, where it doesn't really matter whether he plays well or doesn't play well. I'm not saying he played well here. I want to make that abundantly clear. This really doesn't have a ton to do with this game in particular, but the amount of hate that Fudge gets proportional to how he plays on the Rift is just not accurate. The reputation of Fudge is not accurate. He, going into this year, was clear-cut top laner in North America. I think that that was clear to anybody who watched him last year, where he was just winning. Now, Bwipo has very much like grabbed the reins of that argument and like completely taken control of it, but I'm not freaking out about Fudge. He's a generally inconsistent player, but his highs are still there. And honestly, like, he's going to have bad games, but he's also going to, like, not 80% of his games are all really good. He's just going to make some mistakes every now and then. You know, kind of similar to players like Wayward or Morgan, if you look at, like, the reputations of players who are on really good teams who are maybe just not good enough. I think Fudge is good enough relative. I just think he's maybe a bit more inconsistent. But Cloud9 has real problems. Bot lane looks bad. And while JoJo is good, the inconsistencies of the top side of the map are also concerning. If this team is losing 2 lanes in most games, that's not winnable. Like, that's not a super team. Really, I'm not as worried about Fudge. I think he will be fine. I'm worried about Berserker. Like, again, I have to see something different. He has been the worst player on this team to start this year. If he doesn't show me something different soon, I'm gonna start panicking. And then for Fly, it's the opposite. This team is amazing right now. They are clicking on all cylinders. These players' skill sets and synergies have melded together even better than anybody could have anticipated. This might be the best team in North America right now, and they might have solidified that with this win. Then moving on to our third game of day 2 here, we are officially in the second half of the week, and we kicked off the second half of the matchup between Immortals and 100 Thieves. That 100 Thieves is going to be able to pick up a pretty big win in really good stuff. This team really is the best of the rest right now. They might even be in the top 4 just by default with how bad everybody else looks right now in the LCS, but 100, this team is interesting. They are fun to watch. They are the exact opposite of what we've been talking about recently with teams like Liquid and Dignitas and even Immortals on the other side of this, who are all very slow and plotting, or at least have been in like the last couple of games. 100 Thieves is exciting. They are fast-paced. They are willing to make plays, and they're going to live by the sword and die by the sword. Sometimes they're going to get outskilled, and you know, games are just going to be a little bit more tough when they're put in bad predicaments, but sometimes they're just going to win. And this was a very good draft. Credit Golden Glue. This was a very, very big draft gap. And they were able to pilot that draft into a pretty easy win. So credit to them. For Immortals, you just gotta hope that you don't draft like this again. Like, that really is just kind of the answer to this, is don't pick Zach and Rel and Tom into Poppy Cassante. Like, there's just no way. There is no way that you're ever winning this game. So, again, credit to 100 Thieves. They executed well. Player of the game is gonna go to Sniper in the top lane. The first one of, I hope, of many in the LCS. Is it weird to say that he is, like, genuinely better at the LCS level than he ever was at the NACL level? He is, like, really adapted fast to this, mostly because he's been given a lot of resources. Meech and Ayla have been very much weak side for 100 Thieves, which I'm fine with. I understand that they want to play towards Sniper, who's a bit more of a volatile player more. I feel bad for Meech because he's constantly on weak side duty and he's never really given the opportunity to win games for this team, and I think he's actually been pretty good in that weak side role. Ayla's really not been given a lot of support. He's mostly been playing Enchanters and trying to isolate the 2v2 matchup, but Quid and Sniper are definitely the 2 lanes that 100 Thieves really want to prioritize playing through, and it's helped Sniper a lot. Wasn't so good in the first week, but I think week 2, week 3, he's really starting to come around. Those mechanics are really starting to shine through. His team fighting ability on the Cassante was absolutely there. That's really why he's getting the player of the game here. Laning phase was okay. Honestly, he shut down the Zac really early on. Not that the Zac was ever going to be a major problem. You're playing Zac into Poppy. It's a miserable, doomed matchup, right? But, you know, I do think he did a good job of making sure Castle didn't have any early pressure, and even though Castle was trying to do stuff in the late game, Cassante was infinitely more valuable. Again, good stuff over to the rookie on 100 Thieves. And then Quid was the other player that I want to shout out. Very feast or famine, back and forth kind of player. I think that's definitely an upgrade over what you were getting last year, which was mostly just the negatives. He would have a good game once or twice, you know, in that summer split, but for the most part, it was just, you know, bad games and really not good synergy with the rest of that team. I think this team is definitely built a lot better to play towards mid lane and to give him the resources that I think he was very used to before he came over to North America, and I think it's helped him out a bit. He's still going to have those games where if he's not as good as the player that he's playing into, he's going to look really bad, but when he gets to play into Mask, who he's better than, like mechanically, he just gets to look good, and he gets to team fight, and the rest of the team is already winning, and so he just gets to play a little bit further forward, and those mistakes don't get punished nearly as much, and so, you know, good stuff for Quid. I don't think my opinion of him has really changed all that much, but it's still good to see. River was awesome. Poppy was mega this game. Aphelios Milio is a very good lane. Aphelios has been criminally underplayed, I think, at the pro level to start this year. I get it. Of all the hyper carries, he's not really the strongest, and generally hyper carries are already not in a great state in terms of where the meta is at, but I don't know, man. Milio's really good. Enchanters are really good. You know who loves Enchanters? Aphelios. I think it's worth at least giving him a shot. And Meech looked good here. Ayla was very active. Everybody at 100 Thieves did their job. I think the solo laners were definitely the carries, but I think all 5 looked very good here. And then for IMT, Immortals on the other side, Ooh, what a draft. I mean, like, you're gonna pick Zach, Rel, and Tom into Poppy? Okay, man. Good luck getting in. Like, you really, really got to layer your CC well, but the problem is the enemy has so much damage. It's going to be really difficult for you to ever get onto the Aphelios here so long as River is playing actively. Same thing with Sniper. It's just going to be very difficult for Castle or Armeo to ever really initiate any good engages. Castle tried his best in the back half of this game. I do think there were moments where he was looking okay, even if he did a little bit too much for a lot of this game, but my dead of the game is going to go to Armeo. Those engages on the Rel were just awful. I mean, his timing was miserable. You want to try and layer your CC here with the Zac and the Rel, especially going into the Poppy. You need to make her burn that W. I don't know why I blinked so much. You need to make her burn that early on in fights so that Rel has an easier time getting in and just hope to avoid the shockwave or hope to not get CC chained. But Armeo was, for lack of a better term, blowing his load a little bit too early in these fights, going in, not really doing a whole ton, and then dying. And, you know, he is also a player that's been very back and forth. He had a really good game earlier this week, very good pathing and very smart late game team fighting, but sometimes that just doesn't live up. He's a very bad jungler at playing from behind. Who would have guessed? That's pretty common in the jungle role nowadays. You know, snowballing has gotten a little bit out of control at that position, but Armeo simply needed to be better, and he wasn't. Castle was not particularly good in the back half of this game, although his scoreline is definitely worse than how he played. Mask had moments where he looked good on the Jace, and again, there were some good engages from Castle, but Tactical and Ole were essentially irrelevant in this one, and Armeo almost single-handedly lost it for Immortals. I should say the draft almost single-handedly lost it for Immortals. Just really, really bad situation, but this is a bad team. You're not shocked by this outcome. 100 Thieves should have won this game when they went out, and they won this game. It's nice to see the young players progressing. I would like to see maybe some more emphasis put on the bot lane, just because I want to see what Meech can do if he's given the reins, if he's given the resources to go and carry a game. But for now, at least with what they're doing, they're 500 in a sea of teams that are really fighting out to be top 4, and there's really not a lot to say that they can't be top 4 right now. And then moving on to the fourth game of day 2, the final game of the middle of the week here, and it was Energy taking on Shopify Rebellion, and would you believe it if I told you that Shopify, of course, picked up a win in this game? Are we really surprised? Look at how this week has played out. Cloud9's losing, Energy randomly loses a game here. This has not been a good week to be a top team in the LCS. It certainly has not. Shopify has completed this weird cycle that I've realized where they only beat teams that have the inverse record of them. They beat Cloud9 when they were 0-3 and C9 was 3-0. They beat Energy when they were 1-4 and Energy is 4-1. Now we just need somebody to be 5-2. Unfortunately, they're going to have to hope for a FlyQuest loss in order to get there. But, you know, we'll talk about this game instead. You know, it's kind of on brand for both of these teams, I would say, for Shopify to be a team that can surprise any top tier team if things just start going wrong because of their weird drafts, or, you know, for Energy, who's I mean, they birthed out of the ashes of Counter Logic Gaming. This was truly Counter Logic, so let's talk about it. Player of the game for me is going to go to Fake God in the top lane. This is the best game that he's played in the LCS since he's been back. He has been pretty bad in lane, and that's really been a big concern for me, is that the laning phases have gone really poorly. He's constantly shoved under tower, even in matchups that are relatively fine for him. He just hasn't felt confident in trying to contest anybody 1v1, and he's lost a lot of pressure and lost a lot of gold because of it. I think this was the first example of like, no, I win this. I win these. And going out there, making an impact, and then going into the teamfight stage, being unkillable, actively creating a difference in the back half of teamfights. This was a very good game from Fake God. This is what I want to see. This is what we've seen in the NACL for many years, not only in this run, but in previous runs as well. I've always been a defender and a fan of Fake God. And this is the kind of player that I saw, one that even with lower resources can still be a major impact on the game. Really good stuff from him here. Want to give a lot of credit to Boogie as well on the Taliyah. He often has to take a pretty big concession in terms of what he plays in the jungle in order to enable Insanity to play things like Sion or Garen or whatever he wants to play in the mid lane. This time he brings out the Taliyah. When you look at this comp, like Taliyah plus Varus, you're worried about scaling here, especially into something like Nico Nocturne, as much as I don't like it. But Boogie was able to really take advantage of where this comp's strengths lie, which is being able to be proactive super quickly into games. And Boogie was everywhere, was really active on the map, was able to get the Varus super far ahead. Really good job by B-Voy. By the way, B-Voy's really, really good. I guess we can talk about this now. You know how good B-Voy is? People have stopped mentioning Wild Turtle. Like, that's where B-Voy is at in terms of the performances that he's offered, because Wild Turtle is one of the most popular players of all time. He was there when a lot of people were growing up and getting into esports, and so there are a lot of people on social media that will defend him, and he is a good player. Not an elite player, but he is a good AD carry, a solid AD carry, but B-Voy has already shown that he is better than that on a better team, I think B-Voy could be a top 3 AD carry in the league. league right now. He's got the skill to do that, and this was just another example of that. If you give him an inch, he will take a mile. He's played 2 weeks of games, and he's been great in both of those weeks so far. Really excited to see where he goes from here, but Shopify might get better in the second half purely from having B-Boy on the team. He very clearly looks like this team's best player, and I'm really excited to see what happens there. But again, Boogie was good. Insanity was fine on the Scion. That's the second game now. He's 2-0 on Scion mid. And Zeyzal was good, hit some important hooks on the Nautilus. He's really kind of been very quiet to start this year, but B-Boy is a star here, and it's really nice to see Fake God have a very good game on the top side. And then for Energy on the other side, this is pretty typical of Energy. This is counter logic in its purest form, if you will, where they get an okay draft and they just decide to run it down early and lose the game. Like, it just really is no other way to say it. A dud of the game is going to go to FBI. Don't really know what was going on in the double marksman bot lane where they just were like, we're 2 marksmen. Let's try and dive bot lane. Let's try and dive a Varus. And then they just die. Like, I don't really know what the game plan was behind that, but they kind of turned their brains off for this one. Typically, they're more stable than this as a duo. At least they have been over the course of their history, but maybe the effect of this organization is starting to take root into their playing styles. But FBI was not particularly good. Huhi was not particularly good in this game. I'm not worried about them. They're gonna be fine. They're both very good players, but worth noting that they didn't play well. Palafox also was not very good on Nico. This is a very easy champion to execute on, and he just wasn't able to do that. No real good major ultimates. Contracts lost pressure early because Boogie had a very good game on the other side of this map, and Dokla looked very tilted by the end of this. I don't know if anybody's been watching his streams, but they've not been going super well. He keeps getting trolled. It's NA solo queue. It just kind of is what it is, but this felt like one of those experiences where it's like, I'm kind of in an okay position. Everything's going wrong, and then he just takes it upon himself to try and win the game on his own. 1v9 in the back half and ends up dying a bunch of times for it for basically no reason, but it is what it is. You're not freaking out too much about it. FBI and Huhi are going to be better than this. Contracts and Palafox are going to be better than this as we move forward. I'm not worried about this energy loss. I'm really not worried about any energy loss. This is always going to be a bit of a coin flippy team, and they just lost the coin flip today. Credit to Shopify for being able to capitalize on that. A couple of their players played really well, and I'm excited to see that. But again, B-Boy really feels like a star on this team, or somebody that could potentially be a star for this team. If you can get performances like this out of Fake God, like confident performances where he's going out and trying to actually match the enemy top laner, I think he's good enough to be able to keep up. Boogie was really good here. He's going to be pretty coin flippy, but same thing with Insanity. Again, if you're getting good top side and bottom side, though, I think that's good enough to be like upper mid table. Like, you're not out of this at all. You're 2-4. The league is so condensed in the middle. Like, you're nowhere near close to being away from being able to get like a 2 or a 3 seed even if you continue to win. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, I think the potential is in there for Shopify if things go right. And that's going to bring us to our third and final day of the Super Week here in the LCS in week number 3. And we kicked off our third day with a matchup between FlyQuest and Dignitas. And FlyQuest is going to pick up the 3-0 week. They're going to move to 6-1, and they are alone at the top of the standings. Nobody can match them no matter what happens on this third and final day. They will be in first place by themselves halfway through the LCS year. And that's pretty darn good. This team has overperformed at every single level. And, you know, I mean that even already liking a couple of these players. Everybody has taken a step up this season, and that's a very encouraging. Dignitas really stood no chance. This team made a ton of mistakes, a couple of individual very clear errors, and just a couple of moments of them getting outplayed in pretty key points. But shout out to FlyQuest. They were really good, and honestly, they feel like the cleanest team in North America. Hell, they feel like the cleanest team in the West right now. I mean, G2 and BDS look good, but Fly looks really, really good in terms of what they've been able to do. Whether that's going to last, you know, that's up for debate, but right now it's looking pretty solid, so let's talk about it. Player of the game is going to go to Jensen in the mid lane. He has been amazing this split, and I was high on him going into this year. I had him as my number 3 mid laner, only behind JoJo and Palafox going into 2024. I think a lot of people would have had him lower, but I actually liked his year last year on Dignitas a bit more than others. I thought he was put in a really bad situation that was very anti-conducive to him doing well, very similar to what I say about Larson on Rogue this year over in the LEC, where it's like, I still think he's a good player, but man, that situation is miserable for him. I thought it was similar for Jensen, but Jensen actually grew and started to develop a different part of his game as the year went on, which was really important, and I think he's carried a lot of those notes and that feeling over here to FlyQuest, where he has performed like one of the best mid laners in North America, period. He's right up there with JoJo. He's right up there with Palafox, the two other players that I think you would put him up against. All three have been great to start this split, but Jensen, I think, has been right there. And this Tristana game was one of the best carry performances he has put on in a while. He's gained the reputation of being a bit more of a supportive player, somebody who wants to play Orianna and, as you know, Azir, yes, but like, I don't know, Zillion and the Nivea and these more control mage style champions. Champions that don't really need as many resources in order to be relevant. They're not going to be the primary focal point. That kind of ideology, but here's Tristana in a game full of tanks, and it's like, okay, Jensen, go out there and win, and he did just that. He carried this team this game, so really great stuff from him. Hopefully he's going to be able to keep this up. Inspired continues to look amazing. His pathing is just fantastic. He right now is the best jungler in North America. He's certainly performing like the best jungler in North America, which is really cool. Bwipo's been great. Outplayed Rich in this one for sure. Rich has not really started out this year super hot, but Bwipo certainly has. I've praised him enough already this week, but Masu and Busio are like really good, man. They have very quickly become one of the best bot lanes in North America. I still would probably take FBI and Huhi as a duo, and obviously Berserker and Vulcan, there's something going wrong there, but Masu and Busio are right up there, and you know, I predicted that. I had Masu as my number 380 carry going into the year without him ever playing a game in the LCS. I had Busio a bit lower, but you know, the upside was always there for these two, but I think they've hit it even quicker than I was anticipating, and both of them have shown a lot of individual prowess in order to get there. Masu was great this game. Busio on the Bard is very active. He's been very confident in the plays that he's making, but Masu in particular definitely shown on this Aphelios. I mean, everybody looks good on Fly. I can't point out a flaw in terms of how they've played recently. That energy game sucked, and obviously you wish they didn't lose that, but outside of that, this team has been near perfect across this split already. And then for Dignitas on the other side, you're really just hoping that they can get more proactive. This team has no idea what to do in the mid to late game, and they make constant errors in that stage. They were super inactive in the day 2 game that I talked about against Team Liquid, and in this one, they were trying to make plays too much, and they made some bad plays. A lot of people are going to point to that Isles teleport in the back half here. He is going to get dead of the game for it. And, you know, he does deserve it. He was not good in this game. That teleport single-handedly lost them the game in a position that they were already going to lose the game in, but that teleport was miserable. But XU got mega out-jungled in this game. The Viego had no pressure, was never in a position to ever do anything. Dove was permanently out of every single fight. I like Syndra, but man, if you cannot keep up against a Tristana, you are going to get outscaled and out-snowballed so quickly, and that happened to Dove. Rich got destroyed on the top side. The Aatrox was essentially useless in this game. It wasn't just one player that was having a bad game for Dig. This team is really not all that good. I think bottom 3 right now in the LCS are a bit scary. Immortals, Dignitas, and Shopify are all just not very good teams or not very consistent teams. But Dig, honestly, I feel a lot less confident in them this week than I did last week, even with them picking up a win on day 1. I just don't think this team is very good, and I'm really not sold on them being able to pick up a lot of wins. A lot of people are calling this one of the more interesting teams in the bottom of the standings. I'm really not even sure I'm there anymore. This team just feels very lifeless. But for FlyQuest, it's the opposite. They look very good. Jensen's looking great, Inspired's great, Bwipo's great, Masu and Busio are great. Again, it's all 5. They look like the best team in North America right now. If they're going to be able to keep that up, that's going to be a pretty major year for a Fly team that was really looking for a bounce back after what was a disappointing 2023. And then moving on to our second game of day number 3, and it's another one that I was very, very excited to talk about. There are so many problems with this game, but it was Team Liquid taking on Cloud9, and Team Liquid gets the win. Cloud9 has an 0-3 week in the Super Week in week number 3. They dropped to 3-4. They are now below 500 after starting 3-0. They are in a 4-game losing streak, and they are looking awful in this part of the season. It is not good. All of the worries, all of the concerns, they are coming to the forefront right now. Cloud9 has a lot to prove because everybody expected this team to be the number 1 team in the league, and right now they are not even 500 halfway through the split. This is a disaster for them. Again, I guess Team Liquid won this game, but very similar to their win over Dignitas, they almost won by consolation because the enemy team just chose not to do anything into them. Maybe Team Liquid's kind of a magnet for this, but there are also some things that I want to talk about in this segment. Those of you who follow the channel and don't just watch the LCS content, they know this. There is one game basically every week or one series every week that I just rant about the fans on a bit more. I usually try to save them for later in the videos. Usually you won't stick around unless you're like actually enjoying the content. So, you know, we're basically an hour into this video. And so I feel pretty comfortable dropping this now. If you stuck around, you're probably fine. And you're probably not one of the fans that I'm talking about. But man, I generally like North American fans in terms of like the social media, the Reddit, the Twitter, yada, yada, yada. I typically like them because they are more about propping up good plays rather than dragging down bad plays. But man, Cloud9 fans are really starting to get on my nerves. And it's not all of them. It really isn't. And honestly, maybe it's not even Cloud9 fans. It's just the people who are being very vocal about what Cloud9 is that are saying some things that I just very heavily disagree with. And I think don't really have a lot of logic backed up to them. We'll get to that when we get to the Cloud9 section. But let's talk about Team Liquid first. Player of the game for me is going to go to APA. How can you, as Jojo Pume, and maybe this isn't a JoJo problem, but I'm just saying this. How can you as JoJo and you as Blabber go on record in an interview saying AP is a Ziggs one trick? He's a Ziggs one trick, and if he gets anything else, he can't win. Which obviously, it's partially true, but it's partially not true. It's more complicated than that. Nobody who gets to the pro level is a one trick. It's impossible to play at to get to LCS and be a one trick. You just can't do that. One trick means something different at a pro level, but I think the idea behind it does make sense for APA. He's kind of a style trick. He plays one style very well. But how can you say that in an interview and then just give him Ziggs and then just lose to the Ziggs? Like, that is comical. That is almost jest. Like, I truly can't fathom why you would do that other than just hubris. Like that, not the item, their personal hubris saying, well, we're going to give him Ziggs and we're going to beat him anyways. It's practice, whatever, yada, yada. This is the regular season in the LCS. Don't do this. This is a bad idea. You're below 500. You needed to win this game. APA got Ziggs and he did really well on it. He's player of the game. You could give this to Impact. Impact was fine. Yon was good on the Aphelios. Core was good on the Lulu. But like, this team wasn't particularly great. The individual decisions that Team Liquid made weren't great. It was just APA surviving 1v2s and actually having an impact in team fights. This was a very, very weird game, but Liquid was fine. Honestly, there really isn't a lot to say about them. Everything I would say about them in this game, I said about them in the Dignitas game. So you can check that out if you want my full thoughts on what Team Liquid is. But I want to talk about Cloud9. I want to talk about the perception of some of these players. Fudge is going to get dead of the game. Rightfully so. He built full damage on Gnar. And just your full damage on Gnar with Lilia, Ori, Lucian. Again, it just goes back to the hubris, which I think is really the core of this. It's just the ego for everybody on the team. It's not just Fudge. I want to make that clear. Everybody on the team's ego to draft this comp and then give Team Liquid what they got and then just lose to it because obviously you gave them everything they wanted and you kind of put yourself at a disadvantage. But let's talk about the fan reception to Fudge as a player. I've been seeing a lot of recency bias takes, and I know I have Cloud9 fans in my comment section, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I'm constantly seeing things talking about how Fudge has never been good, about how he's always been a hindrance to this team, and about how he is the reason that this team will not succeed. I find this to be why organizations make bad decisions. I've talked about this in other regions, specifically in the LPL, because LPL fans do this a lot, where they find one player to scapegoat and just ignore all the other problems that the team has. And then the team never gets better because these orgs actually do look at Reddit and they take that into account and they scapegoat this one player in that same way. And that one player turns out to have not been the only problem on the team and you never actually get better. I think Cloud9's smarter than that, but man, does the LoL esports community frustrate me when it's like, okay, Blabber's had horrible pathing all week. He's had absolutely no pressure in the early game. He has not been able to help out any of his lanes. He left JoJo to die in game number 1 earlier this week against Immortals. And when JoJo did have a good game in game number 2, he made absolutely no effort to be aggressive and to engage him, to push the tempo at all on Lilia. In game 3 here, not good. Berserker and Vulcan are legit a bottom 4 bot lane right now in North America, but Fudge is the only problem. And Fudge has never been good since his rookie year. And, you know, Fudge is, you can never put him on a champion that he actually has to do anything on. I know I'm like the person that emphasizes previous points in players' careers, but do we not remember 8 months ago when Fudge was like an MVP finalist in spring last year? Like, do we not remember him gapping everyone in North America last year, basically all year long in the regular season? You can say that he trailed off a bit in summer because he didn't get as many resources, but he was amazing on weak side. His numbers backed that up, but the eye test absolutely backed that up, and he was even better in spring. To sit here and say that the slow start that Fudge is having and the slow start that Cloud9 is having right now in the first half is entirely Fudge's fault. It's absurd, and it is something that I really hope Cloud9 does not take to heart, because it's not true, and it would be bad advice. I'm pretty sure Cloud9 is smarter than that, but we've seen orgs like abandon their philosophies because of what people are saying on Reddit, and I just want to make it abundantly clear. The subreddit is wrong. Twitter is wrong on this one. if you're sitting here and looking at Fudge and saying that's the Cloud9 problem, if you put Licorice on this team, all of a sudden they win every game, you're delusional. Like you are psyching yourself out. Blabber has to be better. Berserker and Vulcan have to be better. If you put Licorice in and these three are playing like this, it doesn't matter. It genuinely doesn't matter. That's my point. There's a lot of things going wrong with Cloud9. Again, all of this to say that Fudge had a bad game and he should have built tank on Gnar and he was a big problem and was never in a good spot, ended up getting killed in a 1v2 against the Ziggs. All of these things are bad, but you can't just scapegoat one player, and I think that's what the community is doing as a whole. So that rant aside, Cloud9's in a miserable state. 0-4 in their last 4 is a disaster. I think things will get better for them. They are too talented to fall down this hole. JoJo's in a really good state right now in terms of what he's able to output. Maybe not so much in this game, but before this game, I thought he was playing really well. I think things will get better. I can't imagine Blabber and Berserker are going to continue to be this bad. Vulcan's been on bad stretches, but Blabber and Berserker, not so much. I'm not really expecting this to be a problem, but Cloud9 fans seemingly right now are pretty doomer. I hope to bring that up. This is a bad week, but I'm almost certain that it will get better as things go on. There are a lot of reasons to believe that. Yes, they're inactive, but that's fixable. That is more fixable than mechanics. And then for Liquid, I don't want to stress too much. I feel like I talked this entire segment about Cloud9, but they're whatever, right? Like APA got Ziggs and he did really well this game. It's really hard to get a good read on APA because he was much better on champions like Azir and Tristana and all those things last year. He was actually very proactive on those champions last year when he was playing with a different jungler who was also going to be proactive, but Umpty has been very slow, so it's hard to know. APA has been worse, but Impact looks solid. If this team can just be fine, I think that's a good thing, like the 4th best team in the league. I don't think their ceiling is much higher than that, but right now, this is another one that kind of adds into that column. And then moving on to our third game of day number 3 here, and another interesting one, 100 Thieves taking on Shopify Rebellion, but this one much more expected in terms of the outcome. 100 Thieves is going to be able to take the win. Like we've been saying, they really do feel like the best of the rest. They should be better than a lot of the teams that are super inactive in terms of how they play, that don't really have a clear direction in what they want to do. Even if Shopify does have some interesting things to talk about, specifically Boogie, who has been playing a lot better this week, they're just not good enough as a unit in order to get over the hump that is a team like 100 Thieves, that is proactive, that does have talent, that is able to put something together, even if it's never going to be entirely consistent with them. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Player of the game is going to go to Quid in the mid lane. Awesome stuff here. Teams have very much started to come prepared against Shopify. They know the assignment. They know Insanity is going to be picking some of these more off-meta picks. I do worry a bit about Insanity. We'll get to that in a second because it does feel like he is starting to rely on these off-meta picks. He's still a very good mage player in the mid lane, but Quid wanted to go for the Aatrox. He knew that this was the thing he wanted to use to beat the Scion, and man, did it work. He clearly has a lot of experience on the champion. He played it very well. Quid's actually starting to impress me a bit. He still is going to have his bad moments, but maybe a more volatile mid laner who can grow into being kind of the focal point of this 100 Thieves attacking force is a really nice role for him. I think River has obviously helped a lot. The momentum that River is able to generate with early game pressure, like with Lilia, other junglers that fit to that Xin we saw earlier in the year, it really helps Quid a lot because it lets him play more aggro. And one of the things that kind of got Quid into trouble last year was that he was too aggro. He would be pushed up in situations where he couldn't really actually match that, and the team really didn't want to spend resources trying to protect him from those situations. I think the team in general is a lot more willing to put their resources and put effort into making sure Quid has a better early game, and I think generally that's helped him a lot. He's always been a player that's kind of needed resources, needed assistance because he wants to play a little bit more aggro. I think if it's a style that they want to play for Quid, it can work. I still think he is a volatile player, but we're seeing the good parts this year, which I think is good. Meech was also very good this game on the Senna. Poor guy's been consistently on Senna duty basically the entirety of the season up until this point, consistently on weak side duty, but he does play a good Senna, so you can't really yell at him too much. I just wish to see him in a more carry-oriented role. Still, that being said, he was the better ADC in this game, and I've been praising B-Boy. I thought his start to this year, week 2, week 3, really good. The first 4 games B-Boy played, I thought were all really solid. This was probably one of his weaker ones, and that's thanks to Meech, who I thought was really good. Ayla continued to look really good in this game on the Tahm Kench. I shouldn't say continue, because honestly, he really hasn't been that much of a standout this year. Maybe the weakest player on 100 Thieves to start the year, depending on which version of Quid you're getting per game, but I thought he was better in this one. The Tahm was actually strong, and the Senna Tahm very much works for the ideology that these players like to go towards. River continues to be fantastic. Like I said, him generating so much pressure is great, and Sniper just kind of got to do his thing. Fake God went back to being a really bad laner in this game, and so he got a pretty free laning phase on the Olaf and was able to translate that into a semblance of teamfight success. But the Aatrox was a massive issue, especially accentuated by the fact that River had Prio and you had a Senna on this team that was basically making it so the Aatrox could never die in any fight. So credit to 100 Thieves. They knew the assignment, they knew their opponent, and they outplayed them. I mean, Quid was great this game, River was great this game, Meech was great this game, so good stuff for 100 Thieves. And then for Shopify on the other side, we're really starting to see the problems with this style of play, and Insanity, I know he can do more than this, right? He has always been a player who can do more than this, but I'm concerned that he has kind of pigeonholed himself into these crazy picks, and specifically things like Sion, because he was winning on them, and because this team wasn't winning. Both of their wins, he's on Sion. So you just have to ask yourself, like, is he scared that he can't win on other things? Because there are so many better mid lane picks that Insanity is good at that I think would fit this comp 10 times better. Insanity is dead of the game, by the way. He was awful on the Sion. He was really bad for the most part this week, and I like Insanity a lot as a player. Man, did I toot his horn last year in 2023, where I was like, this guy is amazing. He was an all-pro for me. I truly think he was a game changer in the mid lane, but it feels like that confidence is starting to fall off. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's how it is. I thought Boogie did a good job trying to bring things back. I think some of that, KDA is a little inflated, but the brand is a problem. That champion is very good at the pro level when you're able to get some damage off. Just wasn't enough to be able to carry. Boogie did have a really good week, though, I would say, generally. Unfortunately, Fake God kind of came crashing back down to earth in this one. He's not nearly as good when he doesn't win lane. That kind of just tends to be the way that it is. He's a player that I think will require more resources as the year goes on. And then B-Boy is a very solid player, but there's only so much you can do on Ezreal when the rest of your team is losing, especially when you're going into something like Senna TK, because you're really not going to be able to snowball or get a ton of pressure in that lane. Generally, I'm not freaking out about Shopify, but there is a chance that they are just the worst team in the LCS right now. I think them, Dignitas, Immortals, they're all kind of in that zone. 100 Thieves is clearly above that zone, I would say. They are definitely an interesting team. Like I said earlier, they might even be top 4. Team Liquid with that win over Cloud9 is certainly keeping themselves there, but honestly, TL, even in a 2-1 week, looked really bad this week, and 100 Thieves is very much knocking on the door of being in a better spot than them. I'm interested to see where things keep going for this team, because if they continue to get better, if Quid especially continues to get more consistent in the mid lane, if they want to play for him more, I mean, this could actually be a Worlds team in year 1. I really don't think that's out of the question. And that's going to bring us to our final game of the week, the 12th and final game and the 4th and final game here of the 3rd and final day. I said final so many times there. It's Energy taking on Immortals, and how could we end off this crazy upset week without an upset? It's not possible. Immortals, of course, picks up the win in this game. Energy loses to both Shopify and Immortals at the end of week number 3. Chaos ensues. They are 4-3. You got FlyQuest sitting alone at the top of the standings, basically by themselves with everybody else in this giant cluster around second place. It's a very interesting position to be in halfway through the year, but before we get into grandeur talk, let's talk about this game in particular. Player of the game for me is going to go to Tactical in the bot lane. I'm going to go on another... This one's not going to be nearly as passionate, because honestly, I'm much more pro what I'm about to say against here than I am the whole Cloud9 thing. I saw a comment that said Cloud9 was like rogue. Obviously ridiculous. But for Immortals, I'm kind of in an opposite space. Every region has their players that they shit on for no reason, no matter whether they play right or wrong. They're quiet when they play well, and they're really loud when they play bad, that kind of thing. And every region also has players that even the minuscule good moments that those players have, that fan base is like, yeah, they're the best player of all time, MVP, go them. Yankos is like that in the LEC. I love Yankos again, and I love Tactical. We'll talk about him, but man, the conversation surrounding him just feels a little out of place in my opinion. Tactical is player of the game here, and he was awesome on the Varus. Really good stuff, good positioning, really capitalized on a lot of the good engages from Ole, and Castle was amazing in terms of the late game positioning that he had on the Aatrox to set up a lot of these Varus, late game team fights, but the Tactical MVP talk is kind of ridiculous. I get it, he's good, but am I the only one watching their losses? That is genuinely just how I feel sometimes. Yes, Tactical has really good games, and there are going to be moments where Tactical and Ole look very good. They looked very good earlier in the week when they were able to beat Cloud9. Both of them were really solid, and, I'm pretty pro this bot lane, but I don't know. I like, did nobody watch weeks 1 and 2? Like, I get again, recency bias is big for Reddit. These people have only watched 3 games, or they only have the memory space for the last 3 games, and so they don't remember the first 2 weeks when both of them were kind of underperforming, especially last week where both of them were kind of really, really bad. But shout out to Tactical. He was really good in this game. I just kind of wanted to push back on the narrative that Tactical is some like MVP candidate. That's ridiculous. Like, they're a top 4-ish bot lane in North America, but I saw some people putting them at number 1. Like, that's crazy. That is crazy. I get it. They beat FBI and Huhi, and we'll talk about that, but FBI and Huhi had an off week, so not going to criticize him too much. I do want to give a big shout to Castle. Castle was awesome in this game, and he is really starting to develop. I was kind of hesitant with him as a prospect. I like Mask a little bit more in terms of the imports that they brought in this offseason. I thought Mask had a higher floor in terms of what he was going to offer. I just didn't really know what we were going to see out of Castle, and wasn't exactly sure if he was going to break through as this big top laner, but his mechanics are very clear. He's a very good laner, and he's a very smart team fighter. He's clearly somebody who came through the KT system because he plays very similarly to Perfect, who's the new KT top laner. It's just a very interesting thing to watch. I think Castle could be a bit of a game changer here at the LCS level if he keeps growing, but he's not quite there just yet. He's going to have these good games, but being able to beat Doko like he did here was very impressive. Mask continues to look good. He was pretty good all week. Armeo's going to have good performance and then bad performance and then good performance and then bad performance, just kind of 50-50ing. And Tactical and Ole are really solid, especially with a lot of the other bot lanes kind of struggling right now. Would I project them to continue to be top 4 as the year goes along? Probably not. I wouldn't expect that to be kind of something that sticks for them, if only because I think there's just too much talent in the bot lane, and I've been praising a lot of the other bot lanes as well. I don't know if Tactical and Ole are going to be able to survive when they're constantly under fire. The last couple of games, they've essentially been left to free farm and not really even tried to be stopped by the enemy team, and it's led to them just basically having a free game. But I think once teams, log in that, they want to play through Tactical, I think games become a lot harder to win for Immortals, and this bot lane starts to get exposed a bit more. But, as it's going right now, it's looking pretty good, and, just because I'm pushing back on some of the hype and excitement doesn't mean I'm down on them at all. And then for Energy, weird week, bad week. It's almost weird because I feel so much better about Energy than I do about like Cloud9, because these losses are significantly more regular for them. I mean, they were, 3-6 at the beginning of last summer before they went on to win it. Like, I'm not super concerned that this team's going to be able to get on a hot streak and turn it around. I am a bit concerned that this bot lane had a really bad week. FBI and Huhi, I think, both really underperformed. Huhi's going to get dead of the game in this one for the Maokai support. Just not really something that I love with Jhin, especially. You're really lacking a lot of damage or consistent damage on this team. You're relying a lot on contracts, being able to get resets in fights and being able to carry on the Viego. And while he was able to do that in 1 or 2 fights this game, I think he got a triple kill in one of the fights and I was like, oh, is he back? It's just not going to be consistent enough. You really just don't have enough tools at your disposal. And I think FBI and Huhi just need to be more aggressive. I know obviously FBI has kind of really developed this weak side, Senna, Jhin kind of mentality, Ashe, that kind of mentality, more supportive AD carry role in the LCS that he's really succeeded on, but he can carry. You can put him on a hyper carry, a damage carry, and he can still do a lot of work. I would prefer to see them go back to kind of that route next week if they have the option to. I also don't think Dokla has been particularly good this year so far. I think he is going to get better because, again, it's Dokla, and he's a very feast or famine player. You're going to get some good moments and bad moments from him, but I think the bad has actually been a little bit more than I expected. Castle was better in this game, for sure. Palafox definitely didn't really have a huge impact, but, again, not really his fault. Not going to blame him. And then Contracts was actually pretty good this game, was team fighting really well in the Viego, just not enough support around him to be able to win it. Again, Energy's still above 500. They're sitting at 4-3, but I wouldn't have expected them to lose this. 4-3 is certainly not where they want to be, because there's a giant spot opened up at the top of the standings with how Cloud9 is performing, and it feels like Energy has kind of let themselves down by not being able to get there. Hopefully they can get back to their form next week, but for Immortals, this was a really nice win. Maybe they're not the worst team in the LCS. There are teams that look less proactive. Hell, Immortals looked infinitely better than Team Liquid this week, and TL won 2 games. I mean, there is a real hole open at the top of the standings for teams that want to be proactive, that are going to grow. Maybe Tactical and Ole are better than I think they are. If Castle and Mask continue to grow, I mean, Immortals could be a top 4, top 5 team if everything goes right. That's how much parity there is in the middle of the standings right now. I'm not going to fully buy in on Immortals right now, but at least they look good this week. That's certainly more than I can say for other teams. All right, but that is going to do it for my LCS Super Week overview and analysis. Week number 3, the standings for the league after half of the year. Half of the split is already done. are up on the screen now. Of course, any ties will just be broken alphabetically, and man, do we already have a lot of ties. We've got some teams at 4 and 3. We've got some teams at 3 and 4. We've got some teams at 2 and 5. One lone team at the top, sitting at 6 and 1. We can go ahead and talk about it. Of course, on the right, you can see a couple of things. Power ranking, where I personally power rank these teams from number 1 to number 8 in my personal power rankings. Change how they have changed from last week to this week in terms of rising and falling in those power rankings, and of course the streak that they're on. Let's go over the risers and the fallers here and now. New number 1, it's gonna be FlyQuest. Taking that number 1 spot, I just can't put anybody else there right now. Cloud9 on that 4-game loss streak looks miserable. You can see they fall all the way down to number 3 because I do kind of feel better about Energy right now. Although I will say this is a short leash. I'm gonna be honest, if they come out next week in 2-0, like if they just dominate and look great, even if it's against bad teams, I'm probably putting them at number 1 again. I'm just letting you guys know now, even if FlyQuest 2-0s, even if Energy 2-0s and they both look dominant, if C9 comes out and just dominates and looks great, then I don't know who they play next week, but if they just crush them, yeah, they're gonna go back to number 1. I just need to see this team rediscover its identity. It doesn't even have to be against a good team. It just has to be against anybody that they show that they can still have the version of them. This is the most lenient I can be here, is moving them down to number 3, but Energy's going to stay at number 2, even after the 2 losses. They were both pretty typical Energy losses. I think they'll be fine. I am going to make a change at number 4, though. 100 Thieves is going to move up. Yes, Team Liquid went 2 and 1 this week. They went the same record as 100 Thieves. Why are they dropping down? Because all 3 of their games they sucked in. They just happened to win 2 of them because their opponents were worse, and that's honestly how I feel. I think 100 Thieves is a better team than Team Liquid right now. Do I think that'll last? I don't know. I probably think actually it will. But 100 Thieves is more interesting. I think they have more potential to win games, and so they're going to move up to number 4 for me, with TL falling down to number 5. And then bottom of the standings changes as well. Immortals moving all the way up to number 6. They've been number 8 since the start of the split, but they are by far the most interesting of the bottom 3 teams. Castle's making improvements. Mask is making improvements. The bot lane looks good. They have a chance to win some games, and I just don't feel the same way about the 2 teams at the bottom here, Dignitas and Shopify. Honestly, I debated putting Dignitas at 8 because I think they were the single worst team in the LCS, maybe outside of Cloud9 this week. They were awful. They did not play any games particularly well. Even their win was very, very weird. Like, I just don't feel very confident in this Dignitas team, but I'm going to keep Shopify, or I'm going to put Shopify at 8 because they were lower in the power rankings last week. Shopify got some weird wins. You know, they've beaten Cloud9 and Energy. I don't know how repeatable those wins are, but they've consistently lost to teams like Dignitas and Immortals. I just don't expect this to be anything other than a bottom tier team. Immortals is the most interesting, but Dig and Shopify are kind of wherever you want to place them. Whoever you want at bottom 1 should take that for you in particular. I don't really have a preference there, so those are my power rankings. This is really the first week where I've actually made changes. They've basically been the same since the preseason, so let me know if you think I'm right in pulling the trigger now instead of later. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on those, but it's time to move into my player of the week and my dud of the week for week number 3 here in the LCS. My player of the week might shock some people. It's going to go to Impact, the top laner for Team Liquid. I know I get kind of the reputation of being an Impact hater on this channel because I talk about how his laning phase is like really bad, but his team fighting is really good and his shot calling is really good and he's a really fun player, but his laning phase is still really bad. But man, did nobody even try to lane in any of the games that Team Liquid played this week. Specifically those Dignitas and Cloud9 games, Impact really just got to get into the late game stage where he is a really good player and just run around as Udyr and just kind of win the game for his team. So really good stuff for Impact. You know, without him, they would not have won either of the games this week, I would imagine, but I still want to see him do a little bit more. Runners up though, Busio, the support for FlyQuest. Honestly, this could be Jensen, this could be Bwipo, this could be Masu, this could be basically anybody on FlyQuest. They were that good this week. That whole team is crushing it right now, and I feel bad only considering him a runner-up. And then I have Quid here. I thought Quid had a very quietly good week. I think that obviously the inconsistencies are still there. He's not a perfect player, but he's pretty darn good. And the 2 games that 100 Thieves won this week were off the back of Quid. I think he played really well in both situations. He's starting to grow his champion pool, get a little bit more comfortable on the mages, and I think it's helping them out a lot. He can play really aggressive in the mid lane, and his team is willing to back him up. River in particular has very good chemistry with him. I'm very excited to see where that goes. I think you could also consider both Tactical and Ole, the Immortals bot lane, runners up here. Both of them were very good, and I would fit them onto this graphic if I could, but I only have 3 spots in terms of how I've sorted it out, and so just consider Tactical and Ole 4 and 5 on the honorable mentions list. But Impact is going to get my player of the week, and unfortunately Insanity is going to get my dud of the week, the mid laner for Shopify Rebellion. Again, it just feels like he's either lost his confidence or he's indexing way too much into these weird picks. I get it, the Scion has been working for you. The 2 games that Shopify has won all year long have been with Insanity on Scion, but I think he's honestly underestimating his own ability to play mages and to play regular mid laners. I think he's indexing too much into these weird strategies. The Garen was not the play earlier on in the week, and the Scion even failed him in the last game of the week here. I think he's becoming too predictable. When you're getting Aatrox picked against you in the mid lane because people know that you're gonna just go Scion, that's a problem. Like that's how you know you're not in a good spot and you need to change things up. So unfortunately, Insanity is my dud of the week, but that is gonna do it. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, let me know down in the comment section below. If you liked the video, leave a like. It really does mean a lot. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people, which I'm always very appreciative of. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. We don't only post about the LCS on this channel. We post about all 4 of the major regions every single week, as well as the NACL Tier 2 in North America every single week on this channel. Hit subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when those videos go live. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.